Today's lesson is on inverses. Now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to, like on the back of this little booklet, you're going to be taping or gluing this into your notebook so you can write on the back of it. I want you to pick a number between between 0 and 20. I don't care. Don't tell me. Write it down. Yeah. You pick a number between 0 and 20 and write it down. Pick a number between 0 and 20 and write it down. I'm sorry, I didn't see it. You got it? No. No, I didn't think he'd done it. Well, I don't know. You may think it's a weird number trick. Now, I want you to take your number, and I want you to add 3 to it. Now, I want you to take that answer and divide it by 2. You have a calculator? Now, besides Sarah, you all have an answer?
I have an answer.
All right. Does everybody have an answer? Now, do you still remember what number you started with?
Yes.
Now, I want you to take your answer. Take your answer. And I want you to multiply it by 2. The answer that you got. Yeah. I want you to multiply that answer by 2. And then I want you to subtract 3 from it. Oh my gosh, you got your original number. No way. You didn't get the original number? I was going to say, we need to talk. Now, here's what we've got to figure out. Why did you get your original number? Because kind of. Now, Jacob had 17. And I told y'all to add 3 to it. This Jacob had picked 17. And I said add 3 to it, so he would have gotten 20. And then I said divide by 2. So his answer was 10. Then I told him to multiply by 2, which is 20. And then I said subtract 3. What do you mean switched? What do you mean opposite?
Counteracts the other.
So here's what we did. Took your number, added 3, right? And then divided by 2. That's what you did first. And then what did we do? We multiplied by 2 and subtracted 3. What do you mean switched them and switched their signs? What do you mean? Okay, so the first time you went this way, right? You added 3, then you divided by 2. But when we undid it, what did we undo first? We undid the last thing first. And how do you undo dividing? By multiplying. And how do you undo adding? By subtracting. So when we did this, we undid this. Yes. Okay. You can do it with any number you want. I was afraid if I said pick a number, some knothead would pick 157.3, and I didn't want to go there. Okay? That's why I said a number between 1 and 20. True. Now, PEMDAS. Yeah. Now this we'll come back to PEMDAS. What if, guys, that's enough. What if we had started with X and we had added 3? No, if I added 3, I'd have X plus 3. And then I'd take that answer and I'd divide by 2. So where do I put the divided by 2? Under what? All of it, because I'm dividing that whole thing by 2. I'm going to take any number I want. Positive, negative, decimal, fraction, square root, doesn't matter. If I add 2 to it and divide by, no, I did it backwards, didn't I? What did we do? We added 3 and then divided by 2, right? Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to come up with some points that make that true. For instance, if X is 1, what is Y? 1 plus 3 is 4 divided by 2 is 2. What if X is 3? 3 plus 3 is divided by 2. What if X is 5? 5 plus 2? 5 plus 3? 8 divided by 2? Let's do one more. What if X is negative 1? Negative 1 plus 3? 2 divided by 2? Now let's talk about undoing it. Now when we undid, what did we do first? When we undid, we multiplied by 2 first and then subtracted 3. You with me? Well, that's a great question. And we will get, yes, that's an excellent question. His question was, why don't I put a Y in there for X? And the answer is, that's an awesome, awesome question. Nobody's ever asked that, and I'm so proud of you that you did. We will talk about that in a little bit. Now, what if X is 1? What's Y? 2 times 1? 1, 2, 2. Minus 3 is negative 1. What if X is 2? 2 times 2? Minus 3. What if X is 3? 2 times 3? 6 minus 3. What if X is 4? Now I want you to look. I've got a negative 1, 1 here. And I got a 1, negative 1 here. I got a 1, 2 here. And I got a 2, 1 there. I got a 3, 3 here. That's not very interesting. No, it's not very interesting. I got a 5, 4 here, and I got a 4, 5 there. What happened? What switched? The X and Y. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in algebra, another name for all the X's is the domain. And another name for the Y's is range. So, ladies and gentlemen, look right here. The domain and the range switch. That's a big deal. The domain and the range switch. You're like, should I be writing this down? No, we're getting ready to fill out the little booklet, okay? Now, let's go to your booklet. What you have been doing, you've been talking about, you've been saying it's inverse, and that's exactly right. Inverses undo each other. Now, please look at the very top of your front page of your notebook. It says inverse function notation, and it says blank denotes the inverse of f of x. In that blank, I want you to put this. Now, that looks like f to the negative 1 power of x. That's not what it is. When you see that notation, it means f inverse of x, the inverse of the function f. Okay? Now let's go down where it says finding the inverse of a function. These are the steps that you use to do what we did with regular numbers. Look at the first one. Replace f of x. What does f of x mean? Y. So your step one is you replace f of x with y. Step two, you don't have to write anything. Switch x and y. Now, why do you think we switch x and y? Because we're doing inverses, and what do we know about the domain and ranges of inverses? They switch. That's why we have to switch the x and y. Now look at step three, solve for y. And step four, replace y with f inverse of x. Now on that first page, we're just going to find the inverses, okay? Look at A. A says find the inverse. Now, before we do it with those mathematical steps, we're going to do it just with our brain, okay? Now, I want you to look at this number, x. What gets done to this number x and in what order? It gets multiplied by 3. So it gets multiplied by 3 and then subtracting 2. How do we undo that? Do you remember? Go back to, oh snap, I went too far. I went right here. Yeah. Look right here. When we added 3 and divided by 2, to undo it, we multiplied by 2 and subtracted 3. So let's look here. If we go in this order, how do we undo it? So x plus 2 divided by 3. Let's see if that's what we get using the steps. Now, it says, look at step 1. Replace f of x with y. So what are you going to write down? Equals 3x minus 2. What's step 2? Switch x and y. So just switch them. And remember, you're doing that because the domain and range switches on inverses. Then what does step 3 say? Solve for y. How do I get that y by itself? Add 2. So that's going to give me x plus 2 equals 3y. Keep solving for y. And look at step 4. Replace y with, that's not what I told you to put on your thing, f inverse. So f inverse of x equals x plus 2 all divided by 3. Look right there. By golly. Good. All right. Let's look at the second one. B. G of x equals x plus 1 divided by 6. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking, I can go from that to that in my head. Fine. No problem. There are some, though, that are going to be more complicated that you can't do in your head. Okay? So that's why I need you to learn the steps. Sir? You don't have to. Now, let's look at that number x. Let's think through this first so we can kind of plan. This is what I think I better get as an answer. What's happening to that x? In what order? We're adding 1 and then dividing by 6. So to undo that, and let's see if that's what happens. times 6. How would I write down x times 6? And then subtract 1. So we think maybe that might be what our inverse looks like. Let's use the steps. Step 1. Replace g of x with y. Good. Switch x and y. Solve for y. So Angel said you're going to multiply both sides by 6. And if you do that, what do you get? 6x equals y plus 1. Subtract 1 from both sides. Y equals. What's your last step? Replace y with f inverse of x. Is that what we were expecting? Ha ha ha, there's it right there. That's pretty cool. Well, let's just look at C and D. Look at C. F of x equals x squared plus 6. Now, here's the deal. When you take an inverse, the inverse has to be a function. Now, I want you to think about, you guys know what this looks like. What's the parent graph? X squared. What's x squared look like? Parabola, open it up. What does the plus 6 do to it? Is that a function? Yeah, it's function. Now, here's the deal. Let's go through the work and let's see what happens. Now, what do we expect? What happened to that x? It got squared, didn't it? So we squared, and then what happened? Added 6. How do we undo that? How do you undo square? So, we're going to take our x, and we're going to do what to it? And then do what? Square root what? The whole thing?
Wait. No.
We subtracted 6, right?
No, just X.
And then, don't we take our number, subtract 6, get an answer, and then take the square root of that?
Yeah.
So that's what this is, whole thing. Now, let's work through it with the steps. First step.
Replace.
Then? Good. Solve for y. How are we going to solve for y? Subtract 6. Getting close. Square root. Now, here's what I have taught you. When you take a square root, what else? Plus or minus. I don't have a plus or minus here, do I? Because here's the question. If I started with one number and I squared it and added 6, then when I undo it, I better end up with one number, the same number I started with. If I put a plus or minus, how many answers am I going to have? 2. I don't want a plus or minus. I just want one answer. So I'm just going to do square root. Okay, I'm not going to put the plus or minus because I just want the one answer I started with. Oh, I'm not making, I'm not breaking the law. Now, what do I replace y with? One more in the front. G of x equals square root of x minus 1. All right. Now, before we do any of the steps, let's think, what happened to that x? Okay, which happened first? Do you think x got subtracted 1 or square rooted first? Why do you think the subtraction happened first? Because it got square rooted 2. Right. So this thing got minus 1 and then square rooted. How do we undo it? Square and plus 1. So let's talk about what we think the inverse is going to look like. We think that's what the inverse is going to look like. Now, all right. What do I replace g of x with? I'm just trying to go through every one step by step. I'm afraid if I combine steps, some people will get lost. Now switch the x and y. Square both sides. Now if I square both sides, what am I left with? Because what do a square and a square root do to each other? So I get y equals x squared plus 1. That's what I thought I was going to get. So f inverse of x equals x squared plus 1. Let's see if I want to do it the way it says here. You know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do something different because I taught this in a whole different way than this page says. Let's go back. Fiddle. Let's just take this last problem that we just did where we said f of x was equal to square root of x minus 1. And we said f inverse of x was equal to x squared. That's my phone. Right? Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to graph them. Because it's pretty cool what happens here. Now, here's my problem. I didn't mean to do that. F of x equals square root x plus 1 or minus 1. Okay. I'm going to... What does? Ladies and gentlemen, let's graph this one. Now, what does that look like? Yeah. When you graph it, it is the parabola x squared moved up 1 unit. Now, let's remember on x squared, let's talk about it. X squared, 0, 0. 0 squared is 0, right? 1 squared is 1. 2 squared is 4, right? You with me? And we're just scooting that up 1 unit. So instead of being at 0, 0, it's going to be at 0, 1. Instead of being at 1, 1, it's going to be here. 1, 2, 3. Remember, write 1 up 1, write 1 up 3, write 1 up 5. Remember that? I want you to graph this on your little paper. No, just use this one. Okay. Wait. All right, I'm waiting. Now we're going to graph this one. That was on your test that you just took. How do we graph that one? I move it right 1. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. We scooted it up 1 unit right here. Now, here's the deal. You're getting ready to learn some stuff that's not even in Algebra 2, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Yeah.
What do you do?
Yep.
So, you might redraw both of them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. We said that the X and Y switch, right? Now, here's what I want you to look at. Don't write this on your paper. What are the coordinates of that point right there? That's -1, 2. What are the coordinates of that point right there? -2, 5. Now, now here, when X is 2, what is Y? Here, when X is 5, what is Y? It's 2. Now, these aren't quite right, are they? But what if I had told you to, what are the coordinates of that point and that point? That one is 1, 2, and 2, 5. Those match up, don't they? Swapping the X and Y. Now, here's the deal. I want you to take a look at the purple graph. When Y is 5, what's X? When Y is 5 on the purple graph, or, oh, I had 2 answers. Oh my goodness, I had 2 answers. Okay, that's a problem, right? Well, all of these are real numbers. They're all real numbers. But here's the deal. Since on this one, I have 2 X values that have the same Y value, that's a problem. So what I have to do when I want to find the inverse of X squared, I do something called, well, it's called restrict the domain. And what it means is I only want to use that part. Because if I use that part, then the X and Y switch. It would tell you what the domain was. In this case, the domain for the purple is X is greater than or equal to 0. It would tell you, okay? What I'm telling you is that when we do inverses with a square, use the positive side, okay? Oh, if this was down?
No, that one was on the other side.
Here?
Yeah, it has to go that way. Would you still use the positive side?
No, you would have had to have used the negative side. Yeah. Now, okay, I just threw a harder one at you. There's no doubt about it. I just gave you a harder one. Now, good. Let's talk about something that would be a little bit easier. If I give you f of x equals 6x minus 2. What is its inverse?
X plus 2 divided by
Do you buy that? X plus 2 divided by 6? Okay. Now let's look at this one. You guys can graph this. What's the y-intercept? What's the slope? 6. -2. Slope is 6, which means up 6, right 1, right? Goes like so. Now let's come up with some points. This point right here. If x is 1, 6 times 1? Minus 2. So this point is 1, 4. This point right here. If x is 0, 6 times 0 minus 2. So this point is 0, negative 2. Now I could come up with a lot more points. Can you come up with 2 points now that you are sure are on the inverse of that? What? No. 4, 1. Just switch the x and y. So switch the x and y. This would be, if you switch the x and y, this would be 4, 1. And if you switch the x and y, this would be, there's the inverse. Are they perpendicular? No, that's a great question. Those are not perpendicular. Okay. I just want you to see a function and its inverse, the x's and y's swap. But if you start with an x squared, you're not going to have both the top and the bottom on the square root part, because that wouldn't be a function. That would fail the vertical line test. Now, look at the very, very bottom question on that page, right below the graph. It says identify the domain and range of both f of x and f inverse of x. Don't worry about that. What do you notice? What do you notice about the domain and range of a function and its inverse? They switch. So I want you to put they switch. And then I want you to put below that the domain of f of x is the what of f inverse of x? No. The range of f of x is the of f inverse of x. What's that? Say again? I'm waiting for y'all to fill in the blank. Domain. I would. I think it's really important. I just told y'all to write it down. There wasn't, it didn't exist. I just wrote it for you. Look on the last page. Would you please look at the very, very bottom? Do you see the box? We're going to fill in the box. The graph of a function and its inverse. Here's what you're going to write. Reflect over the line y equals x. This is in the box at the bottom of the page, the first statement. That's how you finish the sentence. Reflect over the line y equal x. We'll go through that here as we can. Now look at the second thing in the box. The domain and range of a function and its inverse are opposite. The domain and range of a function and its inverse switch. That is the piece that we just wrote down. Right here. Okay? Now here's what we're going to do. What it wants us to do on that last page is to graph those on the calculator and then talk about some stuff. But here's what we're going to do to save some time. Look with me to go here. Well, snap. Come on. That's not what I wanted. Cancel. That one. Look at the first one. F of x equals 3x minus 2. That's a line, right? What's the y-intercept? -2. What's the slope? 3. Now, you see that little graph below it? I just want you to make a sketch. So we're going to go, y-intercept is -2, slope is 3, which means up 3, right 1, up 3, right 1. All you can do is just a little sketch. That's all you can do. Now look where it says f inverse of x, and it says that it's x plus 2 divided by 3. Don't ask me why that red and blue happened. I have no idea. If I wanted to look at this inverse and figure out what the slope is and what the y-intercept is, remember, if you just have one number in the bottom and the top is added and subtracted, you can split them apart like that. These are the same. I don't know if you knew that. What's the number that's multiplied by that x right there? So the slope is 1/3. What's the y-intercept? 2/3. So we're just going to have to just pretend. The slope of 1/3 means up 1 and right 3. Again, that's all you can do, okay? Now I want to show you something. I'm going to dot in the line y equal x. That's where that line is. That's where y equals x. They flip over it. So if you folded this, if this was on paper and you folded it, that blue line would lay right on top of the red line, okay? Now, look at blue. What's the domain of blue? Look, the domain of a line is all real numbers. The range of a line is all real numbers. So when you switch them, they're the same thing. So beside this, where it says domain and range, you're going to put your x is an element of the real numbers, that thing. And the y is the same thing. Then for the inverse, it's the same thing, okay? For a line, yes. You remember how it's always all real numbers for x cubes and cube roots? For cube roots, if you have an odd exponent, this is always true right here. An odd exponent. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the homework assignment, and I'm going to show you what part I want you to do. And Durrell, I'm going to take back something I said a minute ago. Your assignment is on the green worksheet. I want you to do numbers 1 through 8, just like it says. And then on numbers 9, 11, 12, and 13, all I want you to do is find the inverse. Don't graph it.